Thank you everyone for coming. This is the Inclusive Edge. It's a good idea. And it is our Fort Erie Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Coalition. This is a second of a three-part series, two webinars, and then one in-person event coming up at the end of October. So we hope that you enjoy our session today. I'm going to start out by reading the land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge the land upon which we are gathered is the traditional territory of the Adirondack, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe people. We are the beneficiaries of ancient agreements, such as the dish with one spoon between the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee, who agree to share the abundance of the land through peace, friendship, and mutual respect. The two-row wampum by which the Haudenosaunee welcomed the settlers and agreed to share the land in mutual respect, and the Treaty of Niagara, considered a fundamental document by First Nations in all future relations and treaties with the British. We recognize that we have the responsibility to be stewards of the land in cooperation and collaboration with the Indigenous peoples, not only for one generation, but for all generations to come. We understand that we have an obligation to learn the lessons of our history, educate ourselves about the experiences of Indigenous people, and seek opportunities to heal the wounds that will result in reconciliation with our Indigenous sisters and brothers. Many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people live and work in Fort Erie. We stand with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands in which we live. We have the good fortune to live in a land of such abundance, diversity, and beauty. Let us be vigilant in protecting Turtle Island. So again, thank you for coming. My name is Jennifer Pennell-Adjei, and I am the co-chair of the Fort Erie Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Coalition, along with my counterpart here, Ashley. I want to say hi, Ashley. And so we're here with Chris McQueen, and he's going to present today. So Chris McQueen has served as the Chief Administrative Officer for the town of Fort Erie since 2022, bringing with him more than 25 years of leadership experience across the health, municipal, and consulting sectors. Throughout his career, Chris has been known not only for his strategic vision, but also for his commitment to building stronger and more inclusive communities. In Fort Erie, he has been a driving force behind advancing equity, diversity, and inclusion, championing initiatives that support both employees and residents. As an active advocate for the town's Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Coalition, Chris regularly lends his voice, time, and expertise to the community, to community events and conversations that foster belonging, respect, and opportunity for all. During his presentation, Chris will share insights from his professional journey and highlight the values that continue to shape his leadership and Fort Erie's path forward in EDI. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris. Take it away.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. That was first half of my presentation, so I appreciate that.
Sorry.
Thank you so much. So I'm honored to be asked to present today on the Inclusive Edge series that we've got going. It's a good idea: inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. And so what I've been asked to talk about today is really Fort Erie's learning journey. And I call it a learning journey because for the most part, this has been a journey and will continue to be a journey, and a much longer journey, and I'll speak more to that. But more than a journey, it's been a real learning journey. It's been a learning journey for me personally. It's been a learning journey for me and our senior management professionally. And it's also been an organizational learning journey. And so I'm going to be, switching back and forth between those sort of three elements to things as I go through today. But I do want to thank you, and I'll try and make this as relevant as possible. I understand our audience today will be a mix of different people coming in with different perspectives. Some people are here for their own professional learning. Some people are here to increase the professional learning of their organization that they represent. And in some cases, I'm hoping we've got businesses looking to either start the journey, restart the journey, or finish their journey and formalize it through some of the learning today. And I think that was one of the objectives from today. I think in terms of our journey, I am going to go through a bit of personal reflection because it was really a starting point for me in my own professional learning, and also things that I've brought to the organization in terms of what Fort Erie is doing in terms of EDI. And I'm going to shorten the equity, diversity, and inclusion to EDI in the in the interest of time, and I'll use it interchangeably with DEI and IDEA and everything else, just for the benefit, but it'll be a similar context to what we've talked about. I'm going to share some of the best practices that were uncovered in some of the research we did. I'll discuss some insights, some challenges and strategies that we've incorporated along the way, and hopefully leave you with some tools and resources that we'll be sending later, which I'll talk about as I go through the presentation today. So I think one of the important things from the learning journey for me was separating out three things. One was the personal learning, and I'm going to share on some of my own reflections. And then there's the professional learning, so the organization that I am part of, the town of Fort Erie. And in another vein, I'm also a board member on a not-for-profit organization that's going through a very similar journey, but yet a different journey in terms of what they're doing. So I'll bring a little bit of that in. And the organization itself. And so we work in organizations that have different teams, different departments, different compositions of people within those teams. And the organization itself is sort of its own animal in the way that it's learning and becoming more familiar and socialized around EDI principles, EDI practices, and EDI policies, and how that all comes together. And really, the sweet spot for the coming together of those sort of three different spheres of influence is really going to help to inform your organization. It's helped to inform the organization I'm part of to take a more integrated approach with EDI. And so the learning really comes in sort of three parallel paths that all kind of have to work together. And so as we go through, you'll see where sort of there's a lot more intersection between having to address some of people's personal learnings and where they're at versus the professional organization itself, and some of the things in terms of the organization. And they may be at different places and spaces in terms of where they are in their own journey. And as leaders, we need to acknowledge that so that we're able to pace and have the right cadence in terms of how we're trying to move our organization forward with EDI. And so I talk about the learning journey. It's been really about asking some questions. And so I joined the organization, as Jennifer mentioned, just over 3 years ago. The council of the town of Fort Erie was very clear that one of the high overarching principles and practices and visions was around formulating an EDI policy and having a work plan in place. And the recruitment of the CAO, myself, was anchored on that. It was the direction from the coalition. They really wanted to see a leader coming in that was going to help to advance the EDI journey from where it had been. And so coming in, I had a lot of questions, and more from those sort of three spheres is, what do we know about where the organization is at in terms of EDI? Where am I at myself? What do we not know? What things do we need to learn about, and where do we get started, or have we already started? And so it's really important to kind of think about those things as you're entering the journey, because they'll help to inform things early on. I wanted to do one of the things about EDI is putting yourself out there and feeling a bit vulnerable. And so I was encouraged by somebody very close to me to engage the audience a bit. And so I can't really see who's all participating and where people are coming from. And I suspect we've got a variety of different people. And so I'm going to ask everybody to take out their phones, which we've been asking probably people not to do in these types of environments. I'd like you to take out your phones and participate in a fun little exercise here. So if anyone's used Kahoot before, you'll be a bit familiar. It's just sort of a little quiz game. Thank you, Jennifer, for displaying that. So I'm launching Kahoot right now. I just need to move some things. It's going to come up. You got two options to go into Kahoot. You can either go into www.kahoot.it, or you can go into the QR code. It's going to ask you to enter in. And so I'll give everybody a few minutes to either use the camera function, go in through the QR code, or log into www.kahoot.it on your phone preferably. If you can split the screen, then go for that as well. So I'll just wait a few minutes for people to log in.
We need to know the PIN number, Chris.
So the PIN number, is the PIN number showing on the screen or no?
Not yet.
Okay.
Or no QR code. Either one is not there.
Okay, I'm going to stop share for a second. I'm going to bring the Kahoot screen up.
Okay.
Can everybody see that?
Yes, we can see now. So it is game pin 928023.
Very nice. So
Yeah.
Jennifer,
Yeah.
if I could just ask you to put the www.kahoot.it in the chat,
Okay.
put the login. If we have people that are delayed sort of logging in, hopefully we'll catch them. We'll be about 5 minutes, I think, in the Kahoot, and then we'll go back to the presentation. So
And I'm just warning everyone, I'm pretty competitive, so watch out.
So Jennifer, I'm showing about 14 people are in. Do we have more participants than that to wait a few minutes?
We have 20 in total as participants, so maybe just another minute or so.
Okay.
There's 15. We have one more to go if they wish to play.
So I think we'll get started in the interest of time. If people feel like they are not ready to participate, I totally respect that as well. Tough question. So just looking for some background, and you're participating today as part of a business, a community service agency, a municipality, not-for-profit. You're just by yourself, or maybe there's some other reason. Maybe you logged into the wrong webinar and just pick other, and we'll move ahead and move forward with that. Okay, so I need to move the people box out of the way. So we've got some municipal participation, community services, so mostly not-for-profit and 13% of business. So, okay, thank you, everybody. So that gives you a bit of a profile of our viewing audience today. So thank you for that. So how does EDI make you feel? Just one word that comes to mind, type it in. We're going to see what kind of word cloud we can come up with as a group. Gonna move this out of the way for a second. Tired, nervous, unity seen. So a bit of a mix of feelings, an interesting sort of cross section of words, and so maybe we'll take that forward. I may have some comments in terms of some of this stuff. Nervous wasn't me, but that's probably maybe what I would have written, maybe vulnerable. And I'm going to talk a bit more about that as we go through as well. So I'm curious to know, based on a scale of 5, what sort of state of readiness do you feel you're at personally with your EDI journey? I've given a little bit of a scale. It's sort of a more common convention, sort of basic on the one end or 5 on the other. There's nothing really scientific about it. Just curious to see where people are at in their personal journey. So that's pretty impressive. People like really feeling like they're further along in the EDI journey. I mean, it's probably part of why people who are participating today are participating, because they're feeling ready, to hear more and maybe move forward. So this is really positive. I just want to congratulate everybody. That's a great place to be starting today. A different question: what's your organization's state of readiness? So think about your organization as a whole, and where do you think they're at in terms of readiness for EDI or moving forward with their EDI journey? So interesting that we've got, both poles represented here, from basic to sustainable. And interesting that we see, some similar trending around the center in terms of where people are at. So just an interesting, the not-for-profit that I'm part of is in the health space. Some of you who probably know which organization I'm talking about. From that perspective, the organization that I'm part of scores higher towards sustainable than the board rates themselves in terms of their own readiness for that organization, because on the front line, they've been much more exposed to EDI and they've got more formalized processes in the healthcare space because they've been dealing with direct client interaction. So it's kind of interesting. So it's always good to kind of have some reflection on where you're at personally and where your organization might be at. Where do you think your organization's at in terms of their journey? And this is more to get some perspective on where I might want to emphasize or not some of the place. So you're just getting started, right through to a continuum where you've got a policy and your work plan is like well underway. Or you may not be sure, and that's okay too. So again, quite a bit of variation from, starting to having some things underway, some really, really good elements and starting points, some good foundations by the looks of things. And then some of you have some policies and work plans that are well underway. And so excited to hear that and hear more about that as we move forward. So what's one question or takeaway from today that you would think would be helpful in this session? Just type your answers and press enter. You got about 30 seconds to get it in. Okay, so we've got questions about tools, resources, what we don't know, maybe some next steps, some onboarding, remaining hopeful, moving forward. And so hopefully I'll capture some of this today, and if not, we'll have some good opportunity for questions at the end. Thanks for indulging me on the Kahoot exercise. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to go back to the presentation now. I hope that provided a little bit of insight. That was the first time through for me, a bit of a vulnerable exercise to give that a try. We're going back to the PowerPoint.
That worked great, Chris. Thanks. Last time I did that, it was a game, so I was really like on it for the answers, but this time it wasn't really competitive.
I mixed it up a bit. I wanted to keep everybody on their toes so they didn't know what to expect.
But it was great. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. So I talked in the beginning about doing some reflection. And so I want to go back because the first part of my learning journey was really self-reflecting on kind of where I was at. And so I sat in a meeting very, very early on in my role here, and I met with a bunch of community leaders. And one of the community leaders was a very prominent female community leader who was very well respected. And in the course of the discussion, she made reference to the sense that there was white privilege among professional groups that she had been in, and at one point, and not in a very malicious way, but had made reference to me as one of the participants who came from white privilege. And I stopped, and I was kind of shocked because I'd never been in a room where I myself had been identified as somebody with white privilege. And so I was taken aback. I had a very respectful discussion after and said, I was having trouble with that reference because from my perspective growing up, people that I referred to as having privilege would have been people that were wealthy, people that had an easy life, people that had things come easy to them, and had come from a background where I was from a working family with 4 kids. My grandparents worked very hard for anything that came to them. My parents worked very hard. And I struggled with privilege being assigned to me as a person because I had felt that nothing had come easy. And so somebody in my professional circle said, take a look at this academic wheel of privilege and ground yourself in where you may be at in that wheel of privilege and understand where someone else may see you falling within that. And as you approach the center of these factors that contribute to a sense of privilege or a given privilege, it was much more multifaceted than just financial and status or whatever in the community. And so I'm sharing this because this helped me very early in my personal journey to self-reflect on where I was at. And so being a white male from a middle-class family, and as I go around the circle, starting to realize the number of factors that influence how much privilege someone may have and understanding how that changes their perspective in the same situation that I might be in. And so I'm sharing this today because I think this is probably the richest example of something that's pretty simply laid out, fairly comprehensive, but to give people a sense of what privilege is. And the reason why I share it is as I deal with issues in EDI, and I'm challenged sometimes to try and understand someone else's perspective, where diversity or inclusiveness are at the heart of a matter, I often reflect back to this. I've had it printed and on my desk probably for 3 years to go back and look to better understand other people's perspectives on things. And it's been invaluable to me. And it has helped me to understand that privilege was not about wealth. Privilege was about things that I wasn't aware of and am sometimes not self-aware of in terms of a situation that provides some privilege to me as a person, me as a professional, me with a certain gender, me with a certain position in the community. And so it had me going back to this community leader to say, it makes more sense to me now What is the most important thing that I can learn from this as I go forward? And she said to me, Chris, you're a white male and you have a certain level of privilege. And when I go out into the community and I speak about EDI issues or Indigenous issues, people say, oh, here she goes again. She's coming from her perspective. And we've heard this many, many times before. But you coming out as a white male in a community that is predominantly Caucasian, different people listen and your message carries different gravity than mine. And so if I can give you any advice as a leader in our community, I would encourage you to go out and feel vulnerable and talk about how you as a white male can be better tuned in to issues around equity, diversity, and inclusion. And this is the tool that helps me the most. It was great advice. And I said I would go forward and be vulnerable and make presentations like this, where quite frankly, I do feel vulnerable. And it feels odd for me to talk about EDI issues where I may not have a full appreciation or a perspective. And so it is really about self-reflection. And so the most important message you can take away from today is take the opportunity to do your own personal journey and self-reflect. It helps to bring a much different perspective to my understanding and the things I need to learn on my journey. And I am learning a lot of things every day. So I've talked a little bit about this. It has helped in different ways, and it continues to help me to reflect with leadership practices. You'll have access to the slides later so you can reflect back. I've kind of gone through this in the interest of time. I'll move forward because I do want to talk about our journey. So I'm very, very honored to be part of and participate in a community-led coalition. We have a very diverse group of people in Fort Erie who have come together to help us with our journey. Very early learning from them when we were doing the policy was they really encouraged us to have a non-punitive policy. So things like, and if you do not follow this EDI policy, you will go through progressive discipline. Scoured all that out, said, no, that's not our approach. We don't want an affirmative action. This isn't goal-based around EDI. We want to build unity through diversity. We're in a community where some majority of this community come from non-diverse backgrounds. And what we're really trying to do is we're trying to create unity. We're trying to create allyship among that group. And the best way to do it is not to create an adversarial relationship or a sense of threat around this thing that most people didn't understand called EDI. And so really encouraged us to approach the policy through building unity across diversity. So helping other people to appreciate the diversity of the group and embrace it and encourage people to learn and understand things. So as they're on their own personal journey, learn about things that you may not understand about different religions, cultures, other things that, you know, in terms of that sort of wheel of privilege, may be a blind spot. And so it was really around encouraging and knowing that this was going to take quite a lot of time. So as we were moving forward, we didn't want to go it alone. And many of you are on here today because you're trying to figure out, like, what are some of the lead and best practices that are happening? We engaged a Niagara College student group to come in and scour for successful organizations that had proven their EDI implementation, work plans, solid policies, and everything else. They had identified some of the top EDI practices, and I'll come and talk a little bit more about them, and then targeted the work plan on the basis of what some of the best and lead practices were. And they did some baseline work. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the baseline stuff. And so some of the other insights from looking at what some of the leading best practices were, some of the most important things were we needed leadership commitment. It's tone from the top, leaders in the organization, leaders on boards, leaders on councils, CAOs, senior leadership teams need to be committed to EDI because they're the ones that are needing to drive it forward and keep their foot on the gas. we're under, a lot of criticism in the US around EDI principles and practices has really been disruptive, and not part of sort of the Canadian context. So it's kind of discouraging to see that. And so that's an unfortunate situation. But I would say here, we've kept our foot on the gas. We're moving forward with EDI commands. It's the right thing to do. And it's important for leaders to be very out and open and expressing that. Cultivating inclusive environments, looking at places where we may have not traditionally included people to bring broader perspective and engage a broader audience in some of the decisions we're making and help to inform some of those business decisions. And then accountability and progress really was about measuring. Like what gets measured gets done. And in EDI, it's the same thing. And so getting some baseline data, find out where you're at. We did some questions today, it's pretty unscientific in Kahoot, but getting a sense of like, where are we starting today and where do we aspire to get to and how do we measure our path forward? So 4 common workplace work plan themes that came out of best practices. One was about education and learning. And so you have to do some sort of training, and the training really needs leadership buy-in from the start. And so we started with council, we started with our senior management team, and then we moved it through to the management team, and then to all people leaders, and then we rolled it out to everyone across the organization. We participated in those training sessions because it was important for people right to the front line to know we were committed to it. We were talking the language, we were supporting it, and we weren't leaving this as a training session and a poster up in the workplace lunchroom. Like this was important to us. And we also know that the education and learning has to be steady and constant. And so we just need to keep care and feeding the training and the learning and giving people opportunities for different ways of learning as we go. The second was policy and process review. We have to be committed to looking at systemic barriers that are in our policies. And so in some best practice organizations, and we're not there yet, they anonymize the names on applicants coming in to apply for jobs. And so the resumes get rated without the benefit of someone's name on there because people have unconscious biases about names that are not part of their native language. And so it anonymizes that. And so those are things that we are looking at and will continue to look at, but policies and processes really need to be reviewed to ensure they're inclusive. The third is physical environment. And I could go on for like a long time talking about physical environment, but I'll give 3 quick examples. In the town hall, we do not have a non-gender universal washroom in the lobby. So if somebody needs a universal washroom, they have to ask at the desk to use one of the universal washrooms, which we do have, but they're behind the security door. We're working on that. We have to make a couple of changes, but it's something that allows people to not have to identify in order to use a pretty basic function in a facility, a washroom. And so 2 other quick examples, long-standing history, hockey arenas were developed with a single gender change room for centuries. We have arenas, they are built, and we have very limited ability to expand and without a lot of cost. And so over time, anybody that knows a female or somebody who identifies under a non-binary gender, there's very limited options to change for hockey in an arena. And so over time, we have to be more inclusive by redesign. And in the first instance of building things, and so our first foray has been through like public washrooms in some of the parks, is we provide a universal option now just to design in inclusiveness. And it seems quite subtle. Fire departments are another primarily a male-dominated profession over the years, many more females coming into there. They change in the truck bays. We need to find new ways of firefighters to be able to come in and change in those facilities. And so when we talk about a journey, we have a long journey to start to correct out and redesign inclusiveness in. So that's physical environment. So a couple of examples. And so as you go through your own workplace, just have your radar up for physical things in the environment that can change. Another great example is accessibility. Like, we've come a long way with accessibility in designing and redesigning public spaces, which is fantastic. And we just need to broaden that and some of the learning from there. And last is community rollout. The presentation today really is maybe our first foray into some public community rollout in terms of what we're doing and sharing some of what we've done, hopefully for the benefit of some of the people who are looking to implement within their own workplace. Measuring our EDI journey. We started with a baseline survey. We needed to know kind of where we were at. What are some of the strengths? What are some of the gaps? This was a very vulnerable exercise. And I can tell you, when we did our best practices research, the Niagara College students that we engaged had lots of challenges getting data from organizations that were best practices to release the results of their EDI survey. We boldly moved forward. We did share some of the findings with our community coalition. And in terms of interpreting some of the results, I would have to say, from a vulnerable perspective, I wasn't overly excited that we had some of the scores that we got on EDI, because they weren't very flattering in terms of the town. And we really had no baseline, because other municipalities were not willing to share any results they had had. And I think I understand why now. We did this survey before we rolled the training out, because we were curious to see where the gaps were so that we could incorporate them into some of the learning and the training that was going forward. And so I've got these as two examples, and I don't think these were our actual results, but our results were not much different. We were running somewhere between 66 and 80% favorable on statements such as, the town's leadership encourages EDI, employees appreciate others' backgrounds, beliefs, experiences that are different from their own. And so on the surface, you run to the favorable and say, great, we got a passing grade. In fact, we're somewhere between 60 and 88%, I think, was some of the highest. That's fantastic. The counter to that was we were seeing these numbers showing up in green that ranged somewhere in the 3 to 15% of the respondents were saying, we're giving the town a strongly disagree rating on that particular statement. And so again, maybe a small number, but when we were corroborating it with some of the demographic information, we were finding that our own workplace on different measures of diversity, we're saying somewhere between 5 and 12% of our workforce identified with a diversity deserving group, or a diverse group within the categories. And so you could infer from that we have anybody who's identifying as diverse feeling like the organization is unfavorable to them. And then the other category that kind of came as somewhat of a surprise to us, which is easy to discount, is this neutral rating. And so I neither agree or disagree, or I'm taking the middle ground to not commit to agree or disagree. And so what does that mean? And we're still struggling with that, because we don't know. We did inquire a bit with some of the training around, and some people said, I didn't understand what EDI was. And so I had no frame of reference to answer the question. And so I just took the neutral. We worried that some people were just worried about stating an approval or disapproval to something for whatever that reason might be. And so these neutral ratings for us are an area, a gap for us to fill, because we do need to know kind of where people are at. Do they agree or disagree in order to sort of move forward? And so we felt neutral was really not a favorable response in most cases, and may have just been something we needed to do. And so we did incorporate some additional information in our training going forward. So non-responses. There's also this group of people that don't respond to surveys. They probably just don't like them, but maybe somebody didn't respond to the survey because they didn't feel safe. And so it raises the issue around, do we create in our environment a psychologically safe environment for people to express opinions? Is it anonymous? Is it really anonymous? And so, there was some undertone with that when we explored a bit further around why people didn't even fill the survey out. Well, I'm too busy. And, you get a lot of that. But there was some element of people not feeling confident it was truly an anonymous survey. So we need to take that under advisement. The neutral responses I've talked about, and then there was this category of prefer not to respond, which we included as a best practice. So when you ask somebody, are they male, female, non-binary, or if you create this category of different gender identifications, people prefer not to respond for some reason. And we were curious to know, like, what was it that made them not feel comfortable? Again, is there psychological safety around identifying? We found it in the religious, cultural backgrounds and other things where there was this rating of preferring not to respond. And so for us, as we go forward, we need to create a safe environment so people can respond. And in some cases, people may have preferred not to respond because they didn't want to be that one person who could be very easily identified as that person who identified in that category. And so maybe not publishing the results of the demographics may be, the answer as we move forward. And so we gathered a lot of useful insights. And one of the useful insights we did gather that we didn't expect, and some unexpected results. And so when we asked about religious affiliation, which was a pretty broad category, we were quite surprised that we have in the town of Fort Erie people who identify with 14 different religious affiliations. It was a lot more than we thought. And it did change our practices. So when I talk about policy and process, we have for, the recent past generations, maybe decades, we've always hired a Judeo-Christian chaplain for crisis management for firefighters in the fire department. And so this bit of information told us that we have 13 other religious affiliations that may not feel comfortable talking to a chaplain about, a critical incident or something, because they often come from a spiritual place. And so for some people that wouldn't resonate to meet with somebody who came in with maybe a religious bias as the chaplain. And so we've changed our approach with the chaplain, and we've approached as many of the 14 different religious affiliations to find out what services they can provide that would be akin to the chaplain services. So we had to embrace some of the realities. There are some results we weren't happy with. We did share them with the coalition. There's some vulnerability, which, I will fess up. There is a vulnerability when the leadership of the organization gets an unfavorable rating, even if it's 1%. And so you have to come past that. And I guess my learning with vulnerability, or my teaching point around vulnerability, is it's not vulnerable to ask people where you're at. It's not vulnerable to get a gauge of where you're at and how people are actually feeling. The vulnerability is doing nothing about it. And so if I can encourage anybody who's feeling like I just don't feel safe to make the journey, because doing nothing actually is more vulnerable. And if something's not great, and we have a survey, and there are some things that the town needs to focus on, and we've been focusing on, is doing something about it, because doing nothing is the risk around vulnerability, and being committed to make actionable change. We have taken some steps to improve things that we needed to improve. And so I'm going to wrap up because I want to have some time to field some questions. But the lessons we've really learned is that personal reflection piece that I talked about up front is absolutely key. And we all need to be self-aware, whether we're on the side, of being in a diverse community, or being part of a group where there is diversity and you're trying to bring unity to it. Engaging others. We have had invaluable input, learning, expertise, knowledge from our EDI coalition. I can't thank them enough. And for the ones that are on today, you have been an invaluable resource for us in terms of EDI. The approach with EDI, you have to approach with an open mind and a learning mind. Like, this is a long journey. It needs to keep going. You need to start. You need to continue. You need to feed it. It takes time. It may take decades. It may take generations to bring your organization around. Vulnerability is inevitable, but it is manageable. And I'm happy to speak to anybody who has nervousness about moving this forward, about all the gifts it has brought. Changes take time, and you just need to be patient to move it forward. And I commend our coalition because they've probably been the most patient to say, can we get all this done yesterday? And we'd really like to do that. For anybody that was part of the Truth and Reconciliation, like 94 recommendations from the Reconciliation Committee, less than 20 have been, completed and checked off. Like, there is a high degree of patience in this exercise, and it's a learning journey. And I encourage you, embrace it, start it, continue it, feed it, care for it, and enjoy it, and be prepared to learn as you go. So some resources that we can follow up on, we can send you a copy of our policy. This is a dynamic document for anybody who keeps seeing it come up. We keep revisiting it. It's a dynamic document. Get it started, get it in place, and be prepared to revise it many times and update it. We've got the baseline survey questions that we'll be able to provide for anybody that's interested. And we have a consolidated sort of EDI work plan that goes through those sort of 4 categories, 3 of the 4, because the community commitment one we hadn't worked out yet. And that's my presentation. I hope it's been helpful. I am a resource for anybody who is in an organization or a business to provide any more details or guidance. I'll be open for questions outside of here. So if you're not comfortable asking here, feel free to shoot me an email. Pretty easy to get a hold of in terms of email. So with that, I'm going to open it to questions, and I'm not controlling the forum. And so, Jennifer, how does this process work?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just look at what we have and I'll read them out and you can answer. So thank you, Chris. I appreciate all of that. So as far as the resources are concerned, a lot of those things will be provided to everyone who's part of this webinar and our series. And we'll have some resources available at the in-person event if you'll be there. So we will have all those takeaways for you. And you will be able to work on something tangible while you're in that in-person session. So hopefully you'll be able to join us there. The first question we did have come in a little bit ago. You may have mentioned it during the survey, but I'll ask it. It says, how do we measure or ensure effectiveness of DEI initiatives?
So maybe I've partly answered it, but I really do think the questions around EDI, the survey questions we have really don't get at people's own personal reflections. Like, I think that may be something different. But if you look through the EDI ones, they really they ask about sort of interpersonal things. So like sort of a peer-to-peer understanding of just general EDI principles and practices by staff, and then how the organization manages or supports different EDI. So if you go through the questions, you can see they come at it from a bunch of different angles and perspectives. It's really trying to get at the root of where are the areas of growth, where are the areas of strength. And so there is quite a cross section of those questions. And I think it's a good starting point because it does give you the baseline. If you're moving forward with training or something, you might flag something to say, oh, geez, this area really got a much lower score than other things. So that may be one to focus on early in the training. So hopefully that answers that question.
Great. Chris, are you okay if you stop sharing that screen just so we can see a little bit better of you?
Sure.
There we go. Also, somebody just wanted to know, are you okay with sharing that slide deck with the group?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right, perfect. And then the next question that came in was, will Niagara College work with other community groups on similar projects? And if so, who is the most appropriate contact to discuss that with?
So if I give you my wife's email, who's a professor in the HR program at Niagara College, and she gets flooded with emails, I'll probably have to deal with that. But Niagara College offers a capstone project through the HR group. They have had groups go through, if somebody wants to email me at the town, I'll put you in touch with the coordinator for that course. But I would highly encourage anybody, not just with EDI, but like any sort of HR projects, can give you more information about that. But I would highly recommend the contact there. I'm not sure who the coordinator is this year, but I will get that information back to anybody who wants to email me directly.
Perfect. What else? Their marketing program also does capstone projects, as well as somebody has mentioned in the chat. So if that's something that people are interested in as well, that might be helpful. I don't see any other questions. The other question that did come in, I answered it. I typed back the answer, Chris, because I kind of knew it. But somebody did ask about who developed the survey questions and how was it deployed. So my answer was the Niagara College students helped to develop that survey. It was deployed both electronically and paper copies for those who needed them. And it was surveyed to all of the town employees, including the volunteer firefighters. So over 200 people got it, right?
And I think we use like a SurveyMonkey type of platform to put it out electronically. It does some analytics for you. And so.
Okay, so that kind of got that answer. And then let's see. Oh, somebody just said thank you. It's been very helpful. And if anybody has any, we just have a couple more minutes. So if there's anything else that wants to come in, if not, and you think of something later, please feel free to either email Chris directly or myself or Ashley. And we can certainly bring that to the coalition if there's something, or we can bring it to the next in-person event. If there's something that somebody wanted to have answered, we can definitely do it there. Somebody else just saying thank you. It was incredibly insightful. They appreciate your transparency and candor. Last question here maybe is, has there been any discussion on whether there will be a follow-up survey? So now that the town has had an initial survey, they've done some rollout of programs to the staff. What about follow-up?
So we are planning to do another survey. We'll run the same questions and we'll gauge whether we've had any movement. We haven't done it yet, but my feet are to the fire on that one because we do need to get it done. We do want to see if some of the training and some of the rollout and changes we've been making have made a difference or a measurable difference. And again, reevaluating where the strengths and weaknesses might be. But we are committed to move forward with the survey sometime soon.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, we're almost done. I wanted to share my screen here really quick because I did want to give a shout out. I hope you guys can see that. Chris, are we good? Okay. So I just wanted to give a shout out to those particular people on the screen: United Way, Niagara Community Foundation, Niagara Chamber, Niagara Region, Fort Erie Multicultural Center, Meridian Bank, and Little Red Coffee in Fort Erie. Go visit them for all your coffee and snack needs, and of course the town of Fort Erie. We wanted to thank everyone for participating and helping us to bring this webinar series to you guys. We are still taking registrations for our in-person event, so please, your contribution to the ticket will help provide us funds to continue this work and to obviously pay for the work that we've done here. And to also, so you'll get all the resources. If you know somebody that missed the webinars, we can still send them the videos. So that is still part of it. We would love to see you at the in-person event. Again, we'll have lots of resources there. We'll have some panelists to answer all your great questions. It's a very respectful and vulnerable place to be, but we hope that you want to join us for that journey. And we will there will be time for roundtable discussions and actual work to get done. So we hope that you guys will join us if you want to continue your journey on that. So,
and Jennifer, I'll be at the in-person. So if there's anybody who has questions or they want to approach me and ask any questions, I'll be there and looking forward to it. And I also want to thank everybody for participating today. you are leaders in EDI by participating in this session and this series of sessions. So thank you for that. Thank you for giving me the time. I hope it's been helpful or insightful in some way for everybody. And I congratulate you on your journey forward.
Chris, just before we go quickly, what was the first year that survey got done at the town with the staff? Do you remember?
I saw the question come up, and I don't know off the top of my head. And somebody was saying, like, what is the pace of those? It's been pretty inconsistent in other organizations. It really depends on kind of what the cadence is. We've had, somewhere in the order of 240 people trained, and so it had that alone takes a long time. And then getting some of the other policies in place that we were wanting to implement before we resurveyed. So I think it really depends on the size of the organization and the sort of pace that, if you do it too soon, you may not see the kind of change you're expecting. So I don't know if there's anything scientific about it specifically, but we're probably approaching, I would say, probably 18 months to 24 months, if I recall, since the last survey. So we're ready.
All right. Perfect. Well, thank you everyone for coming. I appreciate it. We will thank you everyone on the call and everybody who supported us. And we will see you guys on the 30th at the Leisureplex in Fort Erie. Take care, everyone. Thank you very much.
Take care.